As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, thanks for this opportunity. I noticed one of the members of parliament over there. He reminds me of a friend I went to school with by the name of Fu. And if you add the L, you will get his name. Mr. Speaker, I want to say a special thank you to the honorable member, Mrs. Kissoon. I think she came here and attempted to change the culture or to contribute to changing the culture in this National Assembly by critiquing the budget. Unfortunately, the Assembly, especially on that side, is not disposed to such level of performance. But again, I say thank you. Even though I will remind you, though you said we now have food security, it should be recalled that it is Forbes Burnham who led this country on the road to food security. Mr. Speaker, I felt hurt when the honorable member, Mr. Hamilton, deteriorated to the point where he had to be mentioning the children of ministers and members of parliament who obtain scholarships. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. Once no law is violated, once the child has the ability and the capacity to absorb the education, then like any child in this country, that child has the right to free education. I believe, Mr. Speaker, people end up going down that road when they didn't prepare to defend the portfolio. Mr. Speaker, in the same context, I want to say that I heard about 4 speakers from the other side mentioning on Honorable Ganesh Maipal house lot, insinuating that a crime was committed. No crime was. Mr. Speaker, each and every one in this house is entitled to a house. And once again, they violated no law and they can manage it, then they should be entitled to a house. Mr. Speaker, there are a few things that I must say before I get into my actual presentation. One of the first things I want to say is that the great philosopher Aristotle once said that there is no comparison among non-equals, and therefore it should not make sense, or it is unfair to compare 26 years against 5 years between 2015 and 2020. Mr. Speaker, nobody on that side of the house, Sonia, my dear, let me say this to you. I have no doubt that you could involve the 28 years, but you didn't. Throughout the budget presentation, you were comparing 2015 to 2020 with the rest of the PPP term. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this budget and the people who spoke on its behalf appear to be judging progress based on what the wealthy gets. That's unfortunate. I want to make it very clear. We are not critical of the private sector. We are critical of crony capitalism that is developing in this society. And so we want to make that very clear. Even if you were a capitalist society, free enterprise, there would have been competition and the resources would have been allocated based on competition. What is happening in government today is the government is using the power at its disposal to distribute our resources in an unfair way. I must say to the honorable member, Mr. Rodriguez, I think it was, who talked about our people. I hope you are convinced that our people mean all Guyanese, because all of those that spoke after you said our people. And I want to make it very clear to you, when I say our people, I mean the people of Guyana. And because, Mr. Speaker, I believe I have some facility in the English language. Had I wanted to speak about our, I would have said ourselves, but I said our people. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all of my colleagues on this side who use statistics to establish their case. I am aware that the government has a disdain and a fright for numbers, but we did, and I must congratulate them for laying the reality bare. Mr. Speaker, Franklin D. Roosevelt stated, and I quote, that the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. This budget has not provided for those who have too little. Mr. Speaker, this aptly describes our arguments in this budget. We are not against the private sector. We are not against legitimate businesses receiving contracts. We are against the manipulation of the system to provide PPP crony contractors who are ill-equipped and incompetent with contracts that results in wanton waste and facilitating a slush fund for the PPP elite, friends, families, and favorites. Rich to the rich at the expense of those who have little and deserve more. In the extant situation, there is no progress for those who have little. Consequently, our society is not progressing. Some are at the expense of others. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget of deceit. I repeat that. This is a budget of deceit. It scores high on the art of deceit. It sets out to deceive the people of Guyana. It seeks to make the average Guyanese believe there is something in it for them. There is nothing. It is presented as if there are successes in the non-oil sector. There is little or none for those not benefiting directly that sector. But the reality is they cannot complete many of those projects. I want to remind this House that throughout the years, we were told, oh, our projects are transformative. Let me remind the Honorable Prime Minister, Skeldon's sugar factory and generating component was to light up Guyana, was to make was to make energy cheaper. It never did. Let me remind this House, Mr. Speaker, that there was to be a fiber optic cable that will give these children cheap internet wherever they are. It did not. Let me remind this House, Mr. Speaker. Let me remind this House, Mr. Speaker, that we were to have packaging factories packaging the most beautiful packages. I heard a change the sent into some other building now. Mr. Speaker, if we judge from the history of this government, the gas to shore will experience the same failure. And so those projects are deceit again. This budget uses figure to paint a picture of progress when there is little or no progress apart from the oil sector and its attendant services. It uses jargons to deceive the people. It speaks in percentage to deceive the people. The Honorable Minister sat here and trying to tell us about election and said, we increase our votes in Region 10 in Linden by 100%. Any child would know if you had 1 and you increase to 2 is 100%. Who are you deceiving? You are deceiving yourself. When you go to the actual figures, people are worse off under this PPP administration. It sets out to make people feel they are being empowered when they are not. This budget deceives. The government has no plan for this nation. Mr. Speaker, last year I argued that the PPP has no plan for Guyana. And our opponents on the other side, I prefer to say friends, but sometimes they behave as opponents. Our friends on the other side were furious when I said that. I hope my colleagues on the other side will accept the argument this year. Since no better a person has stated that the government does not have a plan than the head of state in this country, who in an interview with Jose Enrique Arrijo of the America's Quarterly World Political Review stated in his 23rd January 2024 article entitled, "Can Guyana Beat the Resource Curse?" He stated that, and I quote, "When I asked President Ali if his government's present and future ambitions were consolidated in some plan," unquote, the president responded, and I quote, "I've been writing a plan as we go along because we don't have the time to have a plan and then implement it," unquote. Mr. Speaker, imagine.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah.
The references to His Excellency and
For heaven's sake,
please. No, and again, I don't want to quote the legal principle, but please.
But Mr. Speaker, is it not true that if I can lay over to you this article that I've committed no offense, so I can't talk about the president at all in this place?
No.
I have never seen that rule, but I will live with it for now.
Okay, if you want, we can suspend and you can check for the 1-7.
Live with it for now.
Thank you.
And I promise you, he would not be mentioned because Mr. Speaker, every country that takes development serious needs a plan. Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point. Guyana's problem is no longer a shortage of financial resources. The resources now exist. The issue is who can best allocate those resources to ensure that all Guyanese benefit in a way that improves their quality of life. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, we in the opposition offer ourselves to the people of Guyana as the ones who can do that with our people-centered development strategy and vision that put the interest of our people first. Mr. Speaker, this budget does not serve the people of Guyana. This budget cannot reduce the cost of living. It cannot end poverty, since it is designed to give those who have more and relegate the working poor to being dependent on handouts from the government and to live a life of poverty. Mr. Speaker, it is for this reason there is the need for our people-centered development strategy. Mr. Speaker, I know the government well. Soon you see they start using people-centered here and there, you know they're creeping in. They lack ideas, so they must plunder. And so I will opt to define clearly what we mean by our people-centered development strategy. Our people-centered development strategy puts people first and will utilize the resources of Guyana to achieve the ultimate goal of providing a high quality of life to the people of Guyana through the direct and indirect transfer of resources to the people of Guyana, to educate them, support their mobilization of resources to work, and for investments with the aim of alleviating and ultimately eradicating poverty while simultaneously resulting in the sustainable development of all communities and sectors of the Guyanese society, as well as the promotion of good governance and the creation of a just and prosperous society. The PCDS will ensure that the needs of the people, such as healthcare, housing, water, electricity, education, transportation, and other social service are of high quality and guaranteed. That is what we promise our people. Mr. Speaker, it is only with such an approach which we provide for those who have too little that we can able to say we are progressing. The PPP has shown by this budget that they are anti the middle class and anti the working poor, and is focused on making a few super rich at the expense of poor Guyanese. That this budget has no focus on measures to alleviate and ultimately reduce poverty is a serious indictment on this uncaring government that facilitates the impoverishment of our people. In this regard, I wish to refer this House to the draft of measures I outlined in last year's budget to reduce poverty. The Honorable Gail Teixeira came and lifted the document up, and after that, she did not, I'm speaking to her in a capacity as a member of parliament. And after that, the honorable member was unable to say anything else because the information was there. Apart from the absence of anti-poverty measures in the budget, the delivery of a mere 6.5% to our public servants is unacceptable and forces me to repeat our call for our workers to be provided with a livable income and that the income tax threshold should be raised to $150,000. Mr. Speaker, that should be easy to do in this oil economy. For some reason, the government seems to don't want to improve the lives of the ordinary people. We urge you to. Many in this country spout the words Guyana is the fastest growing economy in the world. It is among the 10 richest countries in the world. With the 2024 budget now out, the immodest refrain includes the highest budget in the country. While all these sentiments are true, there seems to be very little awareness by the government that the newfound wealth is not reaching as widely and as deeply as it should into the economy and the lives of our people. Mr. Speaker, the reality is the wealth from oil is not meeting our people. Many children in this country of the poor cannot get to school because the parents don't have the resources to send them. Mr. Speaker, I am concerned that we can produce a budget that does not serve our people. The lyrics of success are mostly from the oil and gas song, which sits at the top of the billboard of economic industries in Ghana and is likely to remain there for a long time unless something catastrophic or dramatic occurs. Mr. Speaker, if the government does not address this new reality and its consequence in a prudent and careful manner, Ghana can easily become a country deeply afflicted by many crises resource-rich countries are known to experience. We appear to be already heading in that direction. We have started to become conspicuously divided by wealth, and we must prevent the income chasm from widening and leading to economic and social instability. We should use our wealth to promote stability and not divisiveness. We must build an economy that uplifts the quality of life of our people and the environment in which they and our businesses must operate. We must make true the maxim, Mr. Speaker, that a rising tide lifts all boats. We cannot afford to leave the powerless behind. We cannot afford to leave the poor behind. Clearly, the oil and gas industry has changed our country, as reflected also in its impact on our economy and revealed in the demand for goods and services through employment, through the need for various support services, and through its involvement in sporting and cultural activities. Positioned in a dominant role and soaring like the formidable and majestic harpy eagle, the oil and gas industry accounted for 70% of Guyana's gross domestic product in 2023. It is expected to make an even larger contribution in 2024 and several years beyond, as it flies high above the other industries that many continue to cling to for their livelihood. And that is important. We seem to be treating the oil and gas industry like if it is the only thing in Guyana, when a lot of Guyanese depend on other industries. Government needs to take action to stimulate growth and development in other industries and to initiate development in new industries, as stated by the Honorable Member, Mr. Sherwin Holder. In this regard, the government is advised to establish a broad task force on new industries and services to ascertain which industries and services should be developed, having discussed and formulated policies and programs based on proper scientific analysis and studies. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this government seems not to have an interest in such studies, but they are important. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this budget has no sums allocated to undertake this important task. Clearly, the government lacks vision. Less than 5 years ago, it took 20 of the 29 industries that we track to generate 90% of our GDP. It now takes 8 industries. This means that 20 out of 29 private sector or private sector oriented industries now account for 10% of the national pie. It is necessary that we work assiduously to ensure that the non-oil sector is expanded to reduce the dependence on oil and ensure we develop a resilient and diversified economy that could protect and serve the interests of future generations. I wish I had seen this as a goal of the budget. This concentration of income among a small number of industry clearly has implications for how the resources of this country are being distributed among its industries and people. This is a concern that is not obvious to us in this budget, as reflective in the massive spending on infrastructure with little regard for our people, as will be shown later. Mr. Speaker, I must clarify, we're not against capital projects, but we're saying to you, capital projects that bear no relationship to human resource and other development will not serve us good. I might be forced to wake up the Honorable Ejil. Yes, thanks for getting up. You did say to us, if we don't want the Demerara, the Wisdom Mackenzie Bridge, we're telling you we want it. And we're telling you that it's we who initiated it. We want cheap electricity, but the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, none of them could tell us the actual figure of what we will pay. They keep telling us it will be half the cost and quarter the cost. I want to remind you, Skeldon was to do the same. Mr. Speaker, this budget fails to charter a course for a wider array of industries to contribute to our national income. Our people-centered development strategy will undertake the task, since we are sanguine that a wider array of industries can contribute far more resources to allocate to the people's development. Industries such as other crops, construction, gold, real estate, administrative services, financial service, and the distributive trade are among the top 8 contributors to our GDP. Though currently so placed, they have also changed position. The budget does not seem to acknowledge the changes occurring. Other crops is now second in place, while gold, which previously occupied second place, now sits in 7th place. Rice manufacturing, which ranked 15 in 2019, ranked 19 in 2023. Education, which ranked 12 in 2019, ranked 15 in 2023. The redistribution in the ranking of many of industries shows that some industries that were once significant players or economy no longer hold that profile. There might be reasons other than the influence of oil and gas for the change in ranking, but it is clear that the effective industries must think of what the changes mean to their competitiveness and their future in the economy. The budget has no measures to address this change situation. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, education, which fell from 12th in 2019 to 15th in 2023, is a clear indication that human resource development is not given the focus it deserves. And it's not that we're against certain things, but the focus is necessary. Our people-centered development strategy will significantly improve the education sector because we believe that the development of human capital is critical to the success of any country development. Mr. Speaker, if you go through all the countries in this world and their development, one common trend that runs through them is the quality of education. And so we urge a greater focus on education. A major lifeblood of our economy is international trade. As a country that relies heavily on foreign trade, we must be concerned as to what the changes in our economy mean for the acquisition and distribution of foreign currency. The new concentration of our economy reveals that 2 industries, oil and gold, generated 94% of foreign exchange earnings in 2023. According to existing data, one can envisage oil exceeding the 90% share of foreign earnings that it was responsible in 2023 in the not too distant future. While we bask as a country in the financial glow of the oil industry, one must wonder what role the current policy on the management and use of foreign generated earnings might be playing in determining access to foreign currency for the business community and the wider society. This is another issue not addressed in the budget. We believe it is important and incumbent on the government to manage the situation properly so that our local private sector can access foreign exchange to grow their businesses. If you like the local private sector, then you need to manage our foreign exchange sector so that they don't cry out. Shortage of foreign currency should not abound in a country where export revenues have grown by over 700% in less than 4 years. And its trade balance has shifted from a deficit in 2019 to a surplus of over US $6.5 billion in 2023. It hurts when the private sector keeps crying out that they don't have adequate resources. By blindly supporting the investment priorities of this government, private sector entities might be serving as the architect of their own inability to access foreign currency to conduct their business. The government's insistence that cement, sand, and stone must dominate the consumption patterns of the country ought to cause consternation among Guyanese. Our foreign exchange management must facilitate the development of the local private sector in the non-infrastructure sectors. When Guyanese had budgets in the 100 and 200 billion, the government could not complete spending the money in a reasonable time. Delays in projects were obvious. In a matter of 2 years, the budget has jumped from billions to trillions. And all Guyanese know that 2 years were not enough time to see an expansion in the absorptive capacity of this country to handle a budget that has grown 3 times in size. Imposing this undue burden on the finances of our country, knowing the risks of waste, inefficiency, and corruption, leads one to the inevitable conclusion that the PPP government has scant regard for the people of Guyana. In this regard, therefore, Mr. Speaker, government needs to ensure that we improve our capacity to implement programs and develop projects that can be realistically implemented and avoid development projects which will place the nation's resources in the hands of the PPP elite, family, friends, and by now you know, favorites. The reconfigurations of our economy just mentioned do not seem to be a matter of concern to this government, since this budget appears not to anticipate the challenges that will confront the people and businesses of this country, as any budget should. The government continues always in a new situation. I want to draw to the attention of the government that the situation has changed, and this whole approach of large budget, plenty spending would not necessarily result in development. Admittedly, the minister used plenty of jargons and an array of numbers to convey the impression that his government cares about the people of this country. What he said in the budget does not comport with the general sentiments and feelings about survival in this oil-rich and fastest growing economy. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge those on that side to be on the road and understand what people are facing. Mr. Prime Minister, as you fly past with outriders, which you're entitled to, remember, you're missing the opportunity to know the reality of our people. And I want to say this to you, Mr. Prime Minister, a minister I want to say this to you, Mr. Prime Minister. While you talk of being on the ground and listening, when we see the videos of the Vice President and company, they tend to ill-treat the people, not listen to them. The concern that this presentation
Honorable CM, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, be careful about imputing.
Okay, let me rephrase. We believe you need to listen to the people so that you understand their reality and don't arrive at your own conclusions about them. The concern that this presentation expresses here can be understood in the situation of the public servants who endure all sorts of inconveniences and hardship, from inadequate wages, high prices, blackouts, water shortages, poor health services, and transport fatigue to keep the government functioning. These should not be the hallmark of the fastest growing economy in the world. Unfortunately, they are. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister was speaking, I know his house has generator, but blackouts are many. Amidst the daily stresses of life, their patriotism, this is the public service, and commitment to work continue to be abused by the government. One theme that has been emerging constantly, as if intended as therapy for the workers, is the reduction or removal of VAT from certain commodities and the gaining of special treatment for the private sector. The impression that one gets is that the government has been trying to focus the attention of people on imaginary taxes and tax benefits while spending their money on goods and services. We see this as an attempt to distract consumers from the relatively meager incomes that they are receiving and the economic plight in which they place themselves. Another case of deceit, I contend. That gimmick is not working because public servants know what they can afford and what they cannot afford. They are the ones living and feeling it. They are the ones know if they can feed their children 7 days a week or only 2. We are fortunate over the years to have benefited from the wisdom of Professor Clive Thomas, a distinguished Guyanese economist and a champion of workers' rights in this country. He has contributed extensively to economic thought regionally and around the world as well. His work makes it easy for us to dispel the illusion that Guyanese are benefiting from the oil wealth of this country. Professor Clive Thomas, in a series of articles in 2012, drew our attention to a simple technique referred to as the tax level that can be used to determine how the income in an economy is allocated between the government and the rest of us. It is very important for Guyanese to be aware of this because this government, in its budget presentations, has perfected the art of deceit and tries to tell us that the reduction of tax here and the removal of tax there ought to be making our lives better. Nothing could be further from the truth. Professor Thomas pointed out that the tax level indicates the amount of money that the government takes from us and the amount that it leaves us with. Because this tool considers the impact of all taxes on our income, no harm is done in ignoring the constant referrals by the government to the removal of VAT here and there. Whatever taxes will impact us would show up in the tax level analysis. The 2024 budget will leave Guyanese with 88% of their income, while the government will take 12%. Withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund are included here, since royalties and taxes paid by Exxon and its partners are paid into the fund. The high percentage of disposable income, 88%, belies the reality of public servants in this country. In 2024, the public servants will receive 2% of all the income Guyana earns. This means that the public servants will keep 1.92% of that money. The minister told this assembly that inflation will be 2.5 in 2024. What it means then is that the public servants in this oil-rich country will get the benefit of 1.88% of the money earned. With that share of income, the public servant can hardly believe that the government is grateful for their service. The reality is that the people of Guyana are benefiting little or nothing from the budget. Our people-centered development strategy will rectify the situation and put more money in our people's pockets through direct and indirect transfer of resources to our people, while ensuring we promote and protect the right of future generations to benefit from our national patrimony. With a benefit of only 1.88%, it should be clear to all who care to pay attention that the oil money is not reaching public servants of this country. And the current wage practices of the government has made public service worse off than they were before. The evidence of this assertion is the progressive yearly rise in income under the APNU ASC from 4.21% in 2015 to 4.29% in 2019. The finance minister will tell you that that is true. In contrast, every year from 2021 under the PPP, the real income of workers went down. An important revelation here is that all the exemptions and removal of taxes are of no real benefit to the public servants of this country in the face of this reality. Our comparative performances show that between 2015 and 2020, people were our priority, and we attempted to ready the nation for oil, first oil. Our PCD will continue this trajectory. To make this point clearer, it is useful to examine the transfer that Guyanese, including public servants, receive under the various handout packages of the government. In 2024, the government plans to give Guyanese 1.44% of the country's oil wealth to implement their income, to supplement their income. These monies will go directly to support school children, teachers, youths, pensioners, and those depending on public assistance. Some will also be used to support business ventures. This is money that will go directly to the beneficiaries, whether through cash vouchers or other forms of transfer. I want you to see that I am acknowledging that people are getting money. The problem is they are not getting enough. When public service incomes are combined with the supposed generosity of the government, they would have gained access to a mere 3% of the 2024 income of this country. It is not surprising, therefore, to see that the people of this country place more emphasis on remittances, which at 5% of the 2024 GDP exceeds the entire earning and grants public servants receive from the government. It is clear Guyanese in the diaspora are doing more for the working poor in Guyana than the PPP government. I wish to thank our patriotic Guyanese in the diaspora and reject Minister Ramson Jr. idle talk about Guyanese sending money to those in the diaspora. And even if that is true, it is only the PPP elite which has such capacity. The average Guyanese cannot afford to live, not just to send money to friends in the diaspora. He walks with his head in the air and knows not what happens on the ground. This government might have people on their minds, but not at the center of the country's development. Consequently, it is not surprising to learn through the media, including social media, of how desperate poor Guyanese have become, that they have resorted to improper financial practices. When I saw a young man going to jail recently, it was heart-wrenching. The government cannot find the solution for these problems because they are part of the problem. However, what is interesting is the reluctance of this administration to pursue the allegations of wrongdoings at high levels in this society. They are well prepared to go after the small man, but the machinery protects he who can damage us. It is against this dismal background that the government and its acolytes are going around selling illusions to the people of this country that owning a home automatically enables them to be a business investor. I was surprised when I heard the finance minister saying that. The people of this country are advised to understand that the doubling of the value of a home does not mean that one is capable of servicing a loan. This grandiose notion about home ownership and business investing can lure people into losing their homes to a bank or some other creditor if the business is a failure. Potential borrowers could be sent into depression if rejected by a bank for inadequate cash flows. The advice from this side of the house is to get advice from experts and not any politician or fly-by-night business promoter. Always keep in mind the old adage, look before you leap. Mr. Speaker, there is hope. Our PCDS will provide homes on a rent-to-own basis, and we will replicate the successes the PNC had when it produced homes in South Randolph and other areas without putting the house owner at the risk of losing the house. The government's admission that they will have to change the withdrawal rules of the Natural Resource Fund to finance the profligate spending demonstrated to the nation what we have been saying all along. There is no plan whatsoever or method to the PPP madness, save enriching themselves, their friends, families, and favorite. This is especially clear given that it is only a short while ago that the PPP passed the law hurriedly amidst widespread public condemnation at the lack of consultation. We must also bring to this nation's attention is that the chaotic governance in concert with a willingness to change the Natural Resource Fund rules on a whim puts the nation's finances and economy at great risk, while also robbing future generations of the certainty that there will be resources saved to help them face their own challenges and opportunities in the future. The PPP is not accounting for a possibility of a prolonged price crisis, such as we saw during the 2014-2016 oil price crash, or even the COVID-19 pandemic. Rather, they have accelerated spending on infrastructure, which we all know to be a primary avenue used to place ill-gotten gains at the disposal of the PPP and its cronies, masquerading as contractors. They are doing this, Mr. Speaker, because they know that this is either their last budget or the second to last budget. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the government refuses to engage in any conversation about the interest payments received by the NRF, which we have pointed out are valuable source of revenue once a structure that facilitates sustainable spending is developed. The European UAFC government in waiting will be involved in sustainable spending while putting the improvement of the quality of life of the people at the center of such spending. Mr. Speaker, we're not opposing spending. We want it to be done properly, and the people must benefit. This attitude of unsustainable spending carries over to the investment committee of the NRF, where the PPP has still not appointed the opposition's choice for the investments committee, though I've reminded my honorable friend, Mr. Dr. Ashni Singh. Is it that they are hiding activities of the fund, which they know will be revealed once our representative is appointed. I am glad if it is not. Well, then appoint him. The NRF, with its hundreds of billions of dollars in deposit, cannot continue to drift along in the wind like a discarded $20 bill. We must see action on this issue immediately. Mr. Speaker, I have remarked about the PPP's relentless thirst for plundering the Treasury, but I must not neglect their similar enthusiasm for incompetence. The government has increased its public sector investment program by nearly 60% without implementing the desperately needed governance reforms that would allow them to effectively manage yet another sharp increase in spending. Every day we traverse the streets, there are more potholes than road, or witness some fresh calamity. How many more times will the government have to rebuild the Grove Road before it is even? Half of the road is always higher than the other half. And the Minister of Works has the audacity to say the road is being affected because of large trucks traversing it. Mr. Minister, obviously, a road which serves sand trucks has to be built to the specifications, Mr. Minister, that will allow them to operate, unless the intention is to have the road deteriorate so that another contract can be awarded. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Public Works should take note that a lot of the roads we are still building them on the specification of the days when we had 2-ton trucks as maximum. But tell us, so why those same big trucks in the United States, etc., don't damage the road? We in the opposition are committed to the good governance of Guyana and will dedicate resources to hiring experts, consultants, and thousands of Guyana's young people to conduct analysis and gather data. Right now, even the minister with responsibility for finance must surely be in the dark as to the unemployment rate or the rate of wage growth or contraction last year, since no official statistics are being regularly published. Mr. Speaker, I try my best to get the unemployment rate, and I cannot. If they have it and they're hiding it, then that's also sad. This is unacceptable, and we need to see a renewed focus on gathering data and conducting analysis. There is a saying that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And that certainly is the case in Guyana today. When I saw the Vice President saying, all we know to do is studies, etc., I was glad. Because if the studies we did make, they could implement bridge and a number of other things. But the things they are doing now have no studies. What we can measure, however, Mr. Speaker, is the epic scale of the waste and squandermania. The PPP has refused to engage with IMF estimates that out of every dollar spent in the public sector investment program, 41 cents are lost. And the IMF consistently urged governance reform. Last year, ignoring these necessary reforms resulted in $172 billion in waste. And this year, the total will climb to over $250 billion Guyana dollars. In fact, the PPP is borrowing approximately as much money as it is wasting. This squandering of a nation's patrimony must not continue. Mr. Speaker, this casual approach to enormous sums is reflected in the government's handling of the audit of oil resources. The government must commit to funding auditors, training auditors, and hiring first-class audit firms to examine offshore oil expenses. We saw Guyana nearly miss out on more than 100 million that could be recovered, and the government has demonstrated little interest in furthering the arbitration process that will reclaim these funds. Mr. Speaker, any patriotic government would have wanted to get those funds to put it at the service of the people of Guyana. On the other hand, the government has again demonstrated its disinterest in the working people, that they could present a budget in excess of $1 trillion while offering a minimal increase in the tax threshold is disgraceful. And they should, sorry, I can't use be ashamed, they should review it. Low to middle income Guyanese are paying tens of billions of dollars in taxes while government wastes money rebuilding roads over and over again. We reiterate our call for the tax threshold to be raised to $150,000 immediately and for further large wages and salary increases given the oil industry's continued growth. Low to middle income Guyanese should not be paying taxes in a country that, adjusting for prices, has the 10th highest GDP in the world, GDP per capita in the world. We must all bear as a warning the historic example of Equatorial Guinea, which once boasted both of a 75% poverty rate and a per capita GDP higher than Spain. The PPP does not like to think about poverty, hardship, or the day-to-day struggle of Guyanese. So the idea of a large tax threshold increase would never occur to them. A reduction in the rate of VAT to 8% is also feasible, given the expected tens of billions of additional tax revenue for 2024. If this is done, Mr. Speaker, it will also put billions in the pocket of everyday Guyanese, directly combating the cost of living crisis. Guyanese can look forward to a significant reduction in tax under the next APNU-AFC government. Mr. Speaker, we believe that our country needs to democratize finance. That means increasing access to banking across Guyana, improving financial literacy, and developing our local stock market. I spoke with an economist at length who is not PNC on this issue. Industries in our hinterland regions made a significant contribution to the non-oil economy, but most banking requires gold miners, loggers, and others to come all the way to the coast to deposit savings. This not only discourages savings, but it also hinders those local economies that could benefit from access to credit, which can only materialize if they are savings institutions. These should be complemented by mobile money and online banking services. Of course, you will have to extend the internet properly and don't hide it from people. To facilitate such development, we can offer investment concessions to banks which open branches in hinterland region. And these tax concessions will quickly pay for themselves in the form of increased growth and tax revenue across these regions. This is reflected in the lack of access to our stock exchange that is limiting the average Guyanese ability to invest. Mr. Speaker, the few brokers that allow citizens to purchase stocks are concentrated in Georgetown, and they are hindered by a stock market that only trades once a week. These brokers should similarly benefit from tax concessions for establishing more branches across Guyana, but also be encouraged to develop financial products that serve the investing needs of average Guyanese. At this point, it would be remiss of me not to emphasize the need for financial literacy and a more focused thinking government attitude towards finance in general. Financial institutions have expressed distress at the fact that regulators are extremely slow to consider and approve new financial products, even where those products have clear benefits to the average Guyanese. Retirement investments vehicles, such as target date funds, should be encouraged so that Guyanese can better plan for their futures. Mr. Speaker, This is a critical issue. And I do believe the government needs to revisit the pension that retired government workers are getting. They are nowhere close to livable incomes. Our citizens must also be educated about the benefits of investing, planning ahead for expected life expenses, and the general advantage of making use of the financial system. This must be introduced at high school level, but also at the University of Guyana and other high learning institutions through a deliberate government outreach program. Mr. Speaker, as this economy changes, if our people are to benefit, their level of financial literacy has to increase, and it is incumbent on the government to do that. The US Federal Reserve highlights that 58% of Americans own stock, often through varied financial products, where sadly, many Guyanese are not even aware that Guyana has a stock exchange. Mr. Speaker, these policies and interventions will benefit Guyanese considerably, with the Federal Reserve indicating that US households added $2.6 trillion in wealth in just 1 quarter last year due to the ownership of stocks. On the other hand, firms will no doubt be encouraged to list on a more developed stock exchange, as well as those currently on the exchange benefit. Similarly, according to the UNDP, the expansion of banking and finance to those who lack such access can contribute to growth more than 1% of the non-oil GDP annually. This is surely a low-hanging fruit that the government can pick. Even further, Mr. Speaker, improving access to banking and financial markets will also provide an opportunity for Guyanese to increase domestic competition in the private sector. This is vital to help bring prices down during this cost of living crisis. We believe the government should encourage this by, in addition to the above measures, providing the Small Business Bureau far more resources for loans and grants. The minimal increases in loans and grants provided to small businesses demonstrate that the government sadly has little interest in small businesses. We have also advocated the establishment of a national productivity bank, which should aim to finance productivity enhancing efforts by medium to large-scale businesses. Mr. Speaker, it goes without saying that the government must support the work of the Competition and Consumer Affairs Commission, but we believe much more must be done in this regard. A deliberate effort to educate the public about the Commission, as well as the dangers of anti-competitive business practices, must be made. This should include reaching out to high schools, the University of Guyana, and the other institutions of higher learning, as mentioned above, with the goal of ensuring citizens can recognize anti-competitive behavior and are aware of how to report these practices. We recognize that protecting consumers is an important element of this Commission responsibility. But it is also critical that we address the anti-competitive behavior that consumers and businesses are complaining has kept prices elevated, even as some elements of imported inflation cooled. Promoting an environment in which there is free and open competition is in the interest of business, citizens, and our country as a whole. We cannot allow local industries to suffer. Rather, we must develop a culture of innovation and dynamism. Mr. Speaker, I know that the government is running from competition because competition tends to remove your power to allocate resources arbitrarily, but you should move in that direction. Mr. Speaker, it will be remiss of me if I do not point out that the national priorities in this budget are misplaced and in some cases non-existent. The fact that Budget 2024, like those since 2020, is not guided by an integrated development strategy and plan is starkly evident. Had it been, it would have contained national budget priorities, but the minister identified none. Every expenditure was treated as equal in importance and necessity. Mr. Speaker, as I move to conclude, the next APNU, AFC government will have the following national priorities: alleviating and ending poverty and a guaranteed livable income. As a priority, not much needs to be explained here. Mr. Speaker, the PPP ducks and ignores this critical national goal and instead hides behind the smoke screen of increased disposable income. But as every Guyanese knows, higher disposable income is a myth against the reality of high cost of living, increasing inflation, and rising household debt. The APNU-AFC will treat this issue of ending poverty and guaranteeing livable income as a serious priority. 2, combating the high cost of living. I don't think, Mr. Speaker, I need to go through this, but to say to you that we need to combat the high cost of living, and the APNU-AFC will do that. The third priority is defense and security. Mr. Speaker, how can the PPP government neglect to speak about defense and security as a budgetary priority? How can the government fail to treat defense and security as an integrated strategy deserving special and holistic attention? One would have expected that spending on the following matters would have merited a dedicated section in the budget speech. A stronger military, enhanced diplomatic capability, more robust border protection, special programs for border communities, and a Venezuelan migrant resettlement policy, but not with the PPP shouting that none of those that I have mentioned can be found in the budget. The budget leaves much to be desired when it comes to the protection of our territorial integrity. Ghana faces threats from its eastern and western border, though less eminent from its eastern neighbor. Inattentiveness to our foreign policy has led to the downplay of diplomacy as our first line of defense. This short-sightedness was evident from the delay in appointing ambassador to 2 of our important border countries, Brazil and Venezuela. It also appeared in the lack of diligence by our foreign service to remain unaware for more than 1 year that a sister CARICOM nation had accepted a gift that degraded Guyana's ownership of the Essequibo. The future of this CARICOM country, the failure of this CARICOM country to alert us to this occurrence in a timely manner raises questions about the suitability of that person to remain fairly engaged in a neutral way in the follow-up to the Argyle Declaration. We wish to inform this House that we do not have confidence in his leadership. It is not in the interest of Guyana for that particular Prime Minister to be involved in the follow-up to the Argyle Declaration. Thank him for the service given before, but let him move on. Our confidence that the seriousness of the Essequibo is fully understood by this government is very low. This is a point of concern because the budget does not give clear enough signals that all appropriate actions will be taken to place our citizens in a stronger position to invest and enjoy life in the Cinderella County. An appreciation of the potential of Essequibo as the largest region of our country must be in priority being given its development and that of its residents. Where in this budget is this priority reflected? Nowhere. Mr. Speaker, there is need for a clear strategy to engage Guyanese communities bordering Venezuela so that they are engaged, conscious, secured, trained, and committed to ensuring Essequibo continues to be part of Guyana. We cannot just hope. We must use the resources of this country to achieve these noble objectives. Merely saying Guyana is we own will not allow us to achieve those objectives. We need a plan to ensure Essequibo continues to be we own. Mr. Speaker, there is need for a well-designed and articulated economic diplomatic strategy aimed at promoting and protecting our territorial integrity and for the enhancement of the capabilities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to implement such a strategy. We cannot sit idly by and allow Venezuela to use Petro-Caribbean dollars to undermine individual Caribbean countries' solidarity and support for Guyana against Venezuela. We are sleeping at the wheel. We must be of assistance to sister Caribbean nations in our time of plenty, as Trinidad and Tobago did in their time of plenty. Mr. Speaker, to do that demands the careful management of our oil resources so we can have an oil diplomatic strategy. Unfortunately, our oil resources are being mismanaged. Skill development and job placement, our next priority. Mr. Speaker, while Budget 2024 highlights the problem of labor shortage, temporary employment, and the mismatch between jobs and skills, and while the minister does not mention GOAL and other government training programs, what is missing is the treatment of this issue as a national priority. One would have expected a cohesive and coherent plan that includes a national coordinating agency to achieve such objectives as skills upgrading, matching skills to job, measures to increase retention of workers, measures to increase women participation in the workforce, measures to expand apprenticeship scheme, and programs to teach fundamental numeracy and literacy. Plenty ideas for you to work on. Mr. Speaker, 5, increasing Guyana's share of oil revenue. The government has made it clear that its position is to depend on the addition of new FPSOs as the sole means of increasing oil revenue for the country. Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House view it as a national priority to increase oil income through tighter audits and monitoring to prevent financial leakages, building our human capacity to monitor oil operation, and the employment of expert firms to advise this government. 5, national teachers and workers. Mr. Speaker, many who sit in the government benches are promoting the building of schools and hospitals as if it is the solution to the crisis in education and health. We on this side of the House believe, I want you to listen to this, Honorable Manik Chan. We on this side of the House believe there is a need for schools and hospitals. However, we believe the mere building of schools and hospitals and training of teachers and nurses will not solve the problem. We need to train. We need to retrain existing teachers and nurses through the provision of greater benefits, higher status, and the creation of a teaching environment propitious to children learning and teachers and other supportive staff in education being comfortable. That is what is needed. The same is equality for nurses. In this regard, therefore, the next APNUC government will establish a national task force for the training and retaining of teachers and nurses. Having studied the problems, the task force will be responsible for developing policies, programs, and projects to ensure we have trained teachers and nurses who the system can retain. There is no sense in training for export. Youth development. This budget fails to adequately address the youth question. Our youth need to be prepared to take the opportunities that are emerging. Unfortunately, the youth is faced with many challenges, among which are high levels of illiteracy. Many do not matriculate, making it difficult to obtain a job, and they lack both the resources and access to the resources to invest and develop business. Mr. Speaker, those issues will be addressed as part of our people-centered development strategy. There will be an effective literacy and numeracy program both in school and for those who would have dropped out of school. There is also a need for technical and vocational training in schools and at the community level Our youth should be incentivized to attend these institutions. This must be complemented with a provision of jobs that offer a livable income. I heard the Honorable Minister saying that these have been provided. Well, I would like to see the amount of community-based TechVac programs you have. There might be some in the school. What I'm trying to say to you on the other side of the house, this issue cannot be addressed solely in the school because there are a large percentage of children who would have already dropped out of school, and therefore we need programs outside of GTI at the community level to deal with these issues. Mr. Speaker, these issues will be addressed as part of our people-centered strategy for development. In addition, there's need for a network of nights. Mr. Speaker, in addition, there is need for a network of night schools across Guyana that will allow the youth to return to school. And for those who would have completed school but failed to obtain math and English at CXC, to be able to obtain those subjects, permitting them to matriculate. Mr. Speaker, we must not sit here and just be idle. We have students out there with less than 5 CXC without math and English and can't get a job. You need, therefore, to set a major failing. Sorry. There will be an effective Additionally, we develop a youth in micro and small business program to ensure that the youth can access the resources they need to venture into business. This program will have a component to train the youth in financial literacy and small business management to prepare them to utilize the opportunity. We will create for them to venture into micro and small business. I must point out that these programs existed when the APNU was in government. Unfortunately, a certain minister who is former no content ended those programs that were delivering significant benefit to the youth of Guyana. Expansion of the productive capacity of the economy. Mr. Speaker, the government mistakenly believes mere spending on infrastructure will automatically lend to the expansion of the country's productive capacity. It will not. Spending over $200 billion to upgrade and expand roads and bridges in community and elsewhere, as it plans to in 2024, sounds like the good thing to do, but it will not correspondingly increase farm output, open new lands for industrial park, or increase access to new mining and forestry resources. And these factors should be considered. This is what should be the focus. And the APNU-AFC infrastructure development agenda will pursue these objectives. I must say infrastructure, as is presently structured, comes over as a slush fund to enrich the elite, the friends, the families, and favorites. When Budget 2024, what Budget 2024 has failed to do is include a set of unified measures to expand the capacity of the economy, to produce more goods and services, and to reduce production costs and improve the quality of life of those who need resources more. Mr. Speaker, the APNU-AFC will in a structured way develop inter-regional highway and bridges to link the 10 regions, opening lands for agriculture, mining, industrial parks, forestry, and opening new vistas for tourism. Mr. Speaker, governments in this country is bad. Mr. Speaker, I want to also point out, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, in dealing with the contentions of Honorable Member Jordan, gave us a set of projects that they're doing all over. We never said you weren't doing projects. We said your projects were not structured to create sustainable agriculture in the regions. And that is what is needed. You can do the water projects all around if they are not geared towards the sustainable development of the region, of the community, and of the people. It is a waste of time. I don't want to go into the comparative analysis between what was done in 2015, etc. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge this House to begin to look forward. I want to urge this House to begin to look forward. And look forward means progressing, not coming with retrogressive legislation, not coming with legislation to kill accountability and transparency as you did with the PAC. We need legislation that promotes democracy. We need legislation that promotes good governance. It is that will carry us forward. The Honorable Attorney General himself said that a country cannot progress if it doesn't have good governance. You have condemned this country not to progress because there is no good governance. Mr. Speaker, governance in this country is bad. The opposition is consulted only when the government back is against the wall, as recently occurred in the crisis with Venezuela. The opposition has no access to the state media, except when it is used by government to vilify us. Our police have been politicized, misused to institute Trump-up charges against prominent political opponents, while refusing to investigate credible allegations of bribery against a sitting vice president. Constitutional bodies are being brought under the control of the executive. Institutions that should be independent are being brought under the control of the executive. If you talk about democracy, you have to speak about independent institutions. This government has eroded the independence of every institution that it puts its hands on. And so, Mr. Speaker, let us stop this nonsense. Fear, Mr. Speaker, is instilled at all levels of our society, just depriving people of their freedom of speech and association. Democracy is being eroded, and we are hurtling from an authoritarian society into a dictatorial one. Mr. Speaker, good governance is needed if our society is to develop. Mr. Speaker, I didn't come here to criticize the government. I came here to say to the government, a lot of your priorities are misplaced. I came here to say to the government that the average man out there isn't benefiting from the billions we are having. I came here to say to this government that we can put resources to ensure our children get to school. What is the sense of having schools and the children cannot afford to go? Mr. Speaker, I come here to say to you, implement a much better hot meal program that gives our children at least 2 hot meals. Children who go to school on an empty belly will focus on hunger rather than the subject matter. It is incumbent on us to recognize that the power lies in our hands to decide whether our people will continue to live in poverty or get a proper standard of living. That is all we ask you for. At least I can assure you I ask for nothing for myself. I ask you to serve the people of Guyana. I wish to close by saying to you, the people of Guyana, have no fear, have no problem. There's a critical and credible alternative. The APNU, AFC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Before I call the next speaker, let me recognize Georgetown's first citizen, His Worship the Mayor, who has been with us this afternoon, and also another Marian, but this time a primary school student, Mr. Manvesh Sharma.